Hello everyone and welcome to what is week 13. It says week 12 up here because project 4 was actually assigned last week. This is a short little video here that as you will see on week 13 really doesn't have an exercise associated with it, but rather just some things I want to go over in relation to project 4. One is just to go over this in a little more detail, and the other is a quick flash thing that again you're not necessarily doing something with, but it's a good way to introduce and think about some possibilities in relation to photographic imagery for Project 4. So I want to go over this a little bit. I'll touch on some points and then we'll pop over into Flash, and I'll just show you a few things here. So the project is obviously named Real and Unreal, and by reading over this I'm sure that idea is sort of pretty simple and straightforward, combining visually in the narrative sense a mixture of real meaning photographic imagery, and unreal, meaning animated vector graphics. I explained at the beginning of the semester, and it's probably pretty clear to most of you by the sort of visual way in which Flash looks. Photographic imagery is what we call raster or pixel-based imagery. It's made up of the blocks. If you've worked in Photoshop, you know what those blocks look like, little tiny dots that make up imagery. Vector graphics different, based on math, based on sort of bolder, more simple colors. We're going to be combining these. This sort of second sentence here, sort of consider how these elements interact to each other. What I want is really an interaction. I want what is probably going to be kind of a simple character, perhaps, interacting with the quote-unquote real environment. Okay, the photographs can and do many things, set the scene. Maybe this is going to be a relief in some sort. A lot of times you guys have had to draw simple background settings, etc. Maybe this set of photographs that you're using are already sort of doing some work for you there, and you can sort of concentrate on what the character is doing, movements of that character within that environment. Okay, so they can also, they don't have to incorporate text, sound, mass, in order to take advantage of previous exercises and projects. Okay, please note that in particular sound, and real simple sound, can be very, very sort of helpful. Imagine a scene, you know, that shows a forest. Just putting in simple sort of wind sounds that, as you guys know at this point, hopefully should be fairly easy, can really kind of make something feel a little bit more complete. So really sort of think about sound, because I think that's pretty important to making a complete movie at this point. 30 seconds, make sure it's 30 seconds. We've had some short movies. Here are the sort of requirements for the raster-based images. Remember, these are photographic images. 5 images. These are not to be taken off the internet. These should be images that you have taken. These could be images from cell phones, old family photographs, I don't know, okay? But they should be something that you have taken or you have the sort of original source from. You're going to hand in a SWIFT, don't hand in an FLA. A few people are still doing that. This is due next week. You'll see on the week 13, and again, this is Project 4 is housed in week 12 because I assigned it last week. This is basically all we're doing this week. Okay. Again, this little video here is just some information. You're not handing in any other exercise. Hopefully you took a look at the Julia Pott belly video. I saw that many people have posted about that and found it sort of visually intriguing. Please also note that a lot of that actually contains video, which we might sort of touch on towards the end of the semester here. Same idea, introducing a totally different type of element that's not, you know, a traditional animated vector graphic. So she had a lot of video there, in particular those waves. But she also had tons of photographic imagery that was a little more, I guess, slick and hidden in places. You can pause those videos. Areas like when she's in the ocean and things like that, underwater, that photographic imagery is present. Be creative about this. I shouldn't have to say that, but the idea being that this is kind of you know, we're getting towards the end of the semester, and because you can sort of set the scene potentially with this imagery or use a set of images from you know, a place you went, a lot can be kind of gained by using this type of stuff, and we'll sort of hopefully see some good stuff. Okay, so that's what's going on here with Project 4. I'm going to pop over into Flash and just talk briefly about a couple things in relation to photographic imagery. Just as a note, I'm in CS6 here. Something's wrong with my CC, but shouldn't make much difference here. This is, I have a photographic image, which I'll pop down on the timeline here in a second. And what I want to sort of go over in this is some simple things that maybe you already know. Some of it was sort of covered in that timeline of when we did the bird, sort of breaking apart and using a vector-based image, or using a raster-based image to get to a vector image. But I want to talk about some limitations and some possibilities. I have a photograph up here. I'm going to actually just plop it down on the stage. It's quite large for the most part. If you guys are working in something like 800 by 600, often, you know, even cell phone photographs are going to be much larger than that. Okay, so you have to pay sort of attention to size. One little side note, generally speaking, unless you sort of do something to that image, which I'm going to do here in a minute in terms of breaking it apart, you shouldn't size up imagery. I don't think that's going to be a problem. Again, if you guys are working in something like 800 by 600 in terms of document size, remember we can change our document size. Some people are still been sticking to this old 550 by 400. Change that to 800 by 600 or something a little bit larger so we have a little more room to work with. But back to the photograph, you shouldn't probably run into the problem of something being too small. What I'm going to do is I'm going to actually click on this thing and I'm going to zoom out. You'll see that it has a blue bounding box. If I go to, and this might be different in CC, window info, what we can see up here is a width and height of that object. This thing is 13 by 50 by 900. Okay. If I click on it again and use the scale tool, I can scale it down. You'll note that when I scale down without holding down shift on my keyboard, it will scale sort of in a disproportionate way. So you're going to want to scale down something that you want proportionally scaled. Make sure you hold down that shift key. A lot of times I see people don't do that. They don't pay attention. They think they can wing it. I have a background in photography. Many of us can sort of tell when an image has been warped. Please just scale those things appropriately. Okay, so I can scale down. When I pop over to my window again, then now this is like 600 by 400, and it can sort of be used in a size that's appropriate for your stage. Okay, next thing I'm going to do is actually make a graphic of this, and I'm going to sort of talk about why. I'm going to go to Modify and Convert to Symbol. I'm just going to call this boy with paddle, and I'm going to make it a graphic so I can kind of mess with this thing. I have boy with paddle, and I've popped over here. Okay, now I'm going to zoom in on this so you can sort of see. Okay, those are pixels. I don't think have to sort of discuss the difference there, but those are pixels. When these things are pixels, I'm going to zoom back out, it's less sort of, we can't sort of mess with it as much, okay? What I want to do here is actually use something that we used for again, that timeline, I believe it was, when we had the bird flying, and I want to turn this into a vector graphic. And you might say, hey, you know, why are we doing that when the whole point of this was to sort of combine vector graphics with raster-based graphics. We're going to turn this into a vector graphic, but it's still going to appear as a photograph. Okay, and we can do one of two things. We can go to Modify, Break Apart, and you'll see that when we modify Break Apart, and I'm going to zoom in, click off of this. Sorry. We have those sort of dots. Okay, when we have those dots, we can sort of assume, to a certain extent, that this thing is now a vector graphic. Okay, and it can be sort of erased. For instance, if we just wanted to use the picture of the boy and the paddle, but we don't want that background. Okay, and you'll note that even though I broke that apart and it became a raster-based graphic, or sorry, a vector-based graphic, it still sort of appears very photographic. If you want, I'm going to back up from this. If you want a little more flexibility, sorry, I keep backing up, you can use what's called Modify Bitmap Trace Bitmap. In this Trace Bitmap, you'll sort of see two different sort of settings. One's color threshold and one is minimum area. Basically what these have to do with is how accurate it's going to trace a bitmap. A bitmap is a sort of another word for a raster-based graphic. I'm going to put this color threshold up to 8 and the minimum area, let's say at 25. What this means, that minimum area, is sort of how many pixels do you kind of want to look at and then clump together. So I'm going to hit OK. This takes a minute. And again, we did this with that bird image. It didn't take this long because there was very little photographic information in that bird image. It was simply just kind of red and black and white, so it's not going to take as long. This is going to take a minute. And once we trace bitmap this, we can go in and erase just as I did after I broke apart. Now, the reason you might trace bitmap instead of, and there we go, is that you might want more or less sort of photographic information to show. Okay, I'm going to click away from this. You'll note that, and this is happening, I get my little spinning wheel, sometimes these images can be kind of clunky, meaning that it's sort of rendering a lot of information on the file. So if you trace something horribly accurate, you might run into a slightly clunkier file. I'm scrolling around here, and you can probably tell just by looking at this thing that it's become, more of a vector-based graphic. We lost some photographic information in there. But you probably, when you zoom out, and if we were to start sort of erasing portions of this, and you exported this as a SWF, you're probably going to still read this thing as a photographic image. You'll see, I get my little spinning wheel, just because there's a lot of information in there it has to render. Okay. Let's see here. Last thing I'll say in relation to this, that's it for this little portion of it. Last thing I'll say, and it's sort of more of a concept in relation to the project, is the idea of contrast. If you place something that looks, in this case, quite photographic against something that is sort of simply, simply rendered in the vector sense and animated in the vector sense, a stick figure, that contrast is kind of what this project is about. The very real juxtaposed against the very, very unreal. I'm going to post maybe an example or two. I think people have found those helpful from past semesters, and you'll see this idea of contrast, meaning that something is obviously sort of in the very generic and traditional sense photographic, and we have this thing interacting with that scene in a much different way. When these things are sort of placed next to each other, they kind of push each other. The photographic looks more photographic, and the sort of animated vector sort of feels more animated or cartoony. And I like that contrast. I think that's quite good. I think those Julia Pott videos do a good job of very, very sort of organically drawn elements and sort of photographic elements. That's it. I'm looking forward to seeing Projects 4. Remember, week 12 stuff is due tonight, which is Tuesday, which is your belly discussion and your Project 3 discussion. Check D2L. I think that's those are the two things that are due. Again, email me with questions, and looking forward to seeing Project 4s.